Werewolves of London. That's all I know from the song.
That's all I know. That's all I know.
Is that the... Oh, no, I'm thinking of Hungry Like the Wolf. That's the scene in that Frankie Muniz movie where the guy's skin turns blue.
No.
And he's... Have you not seen that?
No.
It's this actor... Oh, I can't think of what his name is, but he's dancing out to this pool in the Speedo to Hungry Like the Wolf.
No, that's a different song. But this song is actually inspired by the movie.
Yeah. Anyways, but with that song, he dives into the pool, which Frankie Muniz has put a bunch of blue dye in, and so he turns blue. And I'm hungry like a wolf. Oh, the 80s are great.
The 80s are a trip.
The 80s are a trip. Welcome to Shadow and Light, a film podcast with Molly and Sarah. I'm Molly.
And I'm Sarah.
And today, we are talking about Werewolf of London, the 1935 horror film, which I promise you is not going to be all horror movies. It just happens to be that we're just starting with these because they were some of the first that we watched together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think I watched this movie first, and then I said to you, "Hey Molly, we should watch Werewolf of London." That's sort of cheerful on the spectrum of horror movies.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, it's more cheerful than Death Takes a Holiday.
Oh, 100%.
So,
and how did you find this movie? Because this is a movie you were really passionate about.
Yeah, I think because I have... So, speaking of mustaches I would party with,
Ooh.
I got a thing for Lester Matthews, who is like he's a B-movie actor in Britain, and he always plays the kind of like romantic lead, kind of the backup romantic guy. Mm-hmm. And so I watched him in a movie he happened to be in with Karloff and Lugosi, and I thought, well, this film is trash, but I really like him. So what else has he been in? And then I saw Werewolf of London was on his CV, and I thought, oh, I need to watch that. So I hunted that down. Accidental, yeah, right, cymbal crash, and I just really loved the movie. I knew it was a classic. I knew it was kind of like the original werewolf movie. Was it Lon Chaney Jr. kind of made it a thing.
The Wolfman.
It was the Wolfman and that was like early 40s, I believe. This came first in 1935, and I just love this movie. I mean, it's got a lot of problems we're going to get to, but I still really like it. Yeah,
and I mean, I was initially drawn to the movie because of just the way you sort of talked about it. Mm-hmm. And I think Henry Hull, who plays the Werewolf of London, the main character, I mean, he's not my usual type.
Right.
But I'm into it. Mm-hmm. But also, he just gives a fabulous, heartbreaking performance in this movie. And it's just another one of those cases where this shouldn't be a movie that's as emotionally heart-wrenching as it actually is.
Absolutely.
You know,
he does an incredible performance.
He does a really incredible performance. And I mean, I'm trying to think of another movie that we watched recently where the performances really shouldn't be as good. I think it was when we were talking about The Black Cat again.
Probably, yeah.
Boris Karloff just gives such an incredible performance that's understated, that really should just be kind of a schlocky.
It should be schlocky,
but it is incredible.
Exactly, yeah. Very kind of subtle and nuanced. And
this is very much in that vein.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of value in this movie. There really is. And there's problems, but interesting nonetheless. And kind of, the sort of iconic werewolf movie that influenced quite a lot of other movies. I kind of have a plot walkthrough. I feel like it's almost better to do it that way, and then we can interject stuff as we go along. But it's basically, the main synopsis is a British botanist who, Henry Hull is not British, he's American, but he does an incredible accent job. I would give it a 9 out of 10. He does an incredible job as the botanist who goes to Tibet in search of this rare flower that only blooms under moonlight. And so he goes in search of this flower, and he comes back having been bitten by a werewolf. It starts out with this kind of moody scene where the setting is kind of these moonlit hills of Tibet. I mean, is it accurate? Pfft, probably not. The Tibetans actually are played by people of color. They are played by people of Asian descent, but they're speaking apparently, and I know this because I did research on it, they're speaking Cantonese, and the white actors that are there are clearly not speaking Cantonese, they're speaking basically gibberish. So it's kind of annoying. the only accuracy about that scene is that they're actually Bactrian camels in Tibet, and that's what they use. So, but it's quite well filmed and has a kind of a nice moody setting. I really enjoyed that. And it's very eerie, too. So Dr. Glendon is the main character of the movie, played by Henry Hull, and so he's attacked by a werewolf, and it's very eerie, and I think that scene holds up really well. It wasn't designed for modern viewers. I mean, nowadays we have a movie and we break it down frame by frame by frame because we have it on digital, we have it on streaming, we have it on DVD. We can pause at any point and say, looking for the seams. And in the old days, you didn't have to worry about that. So if there were scenes, if the scene was filmed fast enough, you don't have to worry about it. But I actually paused kind of the scene like during the attack scene. And it's very creepy. The little frame I got of him kind of, the werewolf character sinking his teeth into the arm of Henry Hull's character, Dr. Glendon, it is very eerie. But the way it's done is great. Just good lighting, very moody. I enjoyed that a lot.
What's really great about Sarah's love of this movie is that she's a really expansive walkthrough, just beat by beat of it. And I mean, I feel like this is definitely an experience where I can kind of learn from you because you've done so much more analysis.
Yes, I try.
Yes. So, I mean, take it away. The Tibetan scenes, from what I remember, it's a very beautifully shot film. Mm-hmm. And I think it kind of plays into that idea, unfortunately, with the Cantonese and stuff like that. You were talking about the audience was not as well educated as they would have been today.
Pretty ignorant.
Like when you said with the black cat, where they're like, it's a werewolf. It's actually like a hyena or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's just continuing in that vein.
Absolutely. And then when, as films progress, people are a little bit more, critical, have more of a critical eye. But definitely in this film, they're like, they don't care.
Right. And I mean, nowadays, I think what's great about one of the things about the time that we're in is how much of a push there's really starting to be for authenticity in terms of different cultures and diverse representation.
Absolutely.
But you're just not going to find it, unfortunately.
Yeah. So that's my one thing about this movie that I really can't stand. We're going to get to that, but anyway, so Dr. Glendon finds this Mariphasa lupina lumina, which is a flower that blooms under moonlight. Sadly, unfortunately, not an actual flower. It does not actually exist. So anyway, he heads back to England with this thing, and he's gotten several specimens, and he plans to, sort of grow it in his, laboratory.
In his greenhouse? But
it's greenhouse / laboratory, yeah.
Isn't it really a greenhouse, though, if you don't use light by the sun?
That's a good point. I think part of it is, he's in his laboratory, which is kind of a section of the sort of greenhouse, I would say, complex, because they're very wealthy, rich people. So, wealthy, rich people.
They have video phones. And not to poke holes in the science of this movie, but I'm going to.
Go for it.
The moon technically doesn't give off light.
It reflects it, I know.
It reflects it. At what point was that established in the scientific community?
I don't remember.
Because then wouldn't it just be, if you put sunlight through a filter, it should grow?
Right, yeah. And I think that's what he experiments with, and it doesn't work.
Right.
Well, the thing about, there are flowers that bloom at night, but it has nothing to do with moon rays, because there's no such thing. It's literally just reflected sunlight.
Or is it more accurate that the flower only blooms when the moon is full rather than by the moonlight? Because aren't they in the place and it blooms on its own, but you can't actually see the moon because he's in its lab? Like the plant is in its lab.
Right. I think at one point I thought he has that big ray that looks like a sort of a giant dental tool. Mm-hmm. And it sort of, it's supposed to mimic moonlight, but I don't think it actually works. I think he literally has to have there's like a little window open or something. But no, I definitely pick holes in the science of this. And so, I mean, the audience watching, a movie that's like not even an hour and a half, no one's going to notice or care.
And it's a movie about a werewolf. I mean, if you're buying into that, yes, werewolves exist in this story, then whatever.
We're going to suspend our disbelief about flowers.
Yes, exactly.
He's living out that whole mad scientist aesthetic that was very popular in the 30s. Thank you, Colin Clive. But he's got, like you said, he's got some high-tech equipment. He's got that weird little sort of FaceTimey thing.
And is his wife American?
No, she's British as well. So she's played by Valerie Hobson.
Does she have a British accent?
Oh, yeah. Very strong. Very strong accent.
I don't remember it.
But extremely uppity to the point where I'm like, oh, God, that hurts the ears.
Yeah. Anyways, so he goes back to London, and you see him working in his lab, and he has this beautiful wife who is actually in real life. This actress was 27 years younger than Henry Hull by the time they filmed this movie, which is obvious. And they're having this garden party, and she's like, "Come out to the party," and he's like, "I want to be a scientist. Why don't you let me just live my life?"
Thanks, Eliza.
Yeah,
Sorry.
More or less, that's kind of
how No, that's cute though. But he does want to live his life and do his thing.
But then this old beau of his wife shows up, who has a mustache, which honestly I'm a little disappointed in.
I know. I you know what? I will party with his mustache, and you can go and party with someone else's mustache.
Deal.
Invite Vincent Price to the party. He would have been a lot younger.
It's a Clark Gable mustache, but it's too thin.
It is too thin. It needs to be a little thicker.
Thin, right. And that just weirds me out.
It is a little bit too thin. I must agree with you. That is a little bit weird.
Okay, anyway, so we're at the party.
Yeah, and it's I think it's like a botany society party to kind of like promote his work or something, but he's antisocial and doesn't want to deal with it. So.
And the antisocial piece is something I think that we're going to get into our analysis later.
Absolutely. Yep, I'm saving that.
Okay.
So yeah, but he's secretive, and then he's annoyed that she's wants him to come out to play. And she calls him Dear Old Bear, which is very sweet.
Dear Old Bear.
Dear Old Bear, very sweet. But yeah, I always joke that that's sort of ironically hinting at his sort of animal nature underneath. Henry Hull is from Louisville, Kentucky, but he does a darn good job at the accent, so I'm very impressed with that.
And he's a handsome older man, too.
He is very attractive. I think so. I mean, I know that there was some talk about him not being a popular lead because his nose was too short. I'm like, I don't give a darn. He looked great.
He did look great.
He was lovely. I think he did a great
job. He gave Bela Lugosi Dracula. I mean, I think we can just kind of...
Yeah.
Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, obviously.
That's very true, indeed. So enter her old beau, Paul. Lester Matthews, the man I would party with his mustache. But, they sort of reminisce about their childhood, and then Dr. Glendon's like, "Oh, God, let me leave. I hate this. This is sickly. Let me go." And he's jealous, which is understandable.
He's jealous of that mustache game, because he's balding by this point.
That's very true.
I mean, it's a distinguished loss of follicle.
Follicle collateral.
Oh, that is so good. We're clearly English majors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Follicle collateral. I'm very happy to coin that phrase. Oh my gosh.
Put that on a t-shirt. Ooh, baby. I like your follicle collateral. New pickup line.
Oh man, I'm going to use that at a bar at some point in my future, I swear.
Please do. Speaking of good follicle collateral, though, have you seen Stranger Things? Because Steve Harrington has the best head of hair.
I have yet to dive into Stranger Things.
We're going to watch it.
Gosh,
I mean, it's a TV show, it's not a movie. But
we're going to binge it.
We could. And, okay, back to...
Yes, so, and then side note, Dr. Glendon, he's got some tricked out plants. He's got one they literally feed a frog to. I mean, they did it just because I guess the props department had some spare fuzz and wires, and they're like, let's make a fake plant. It was interesting.
There are plants, though, that eat.
Oh, absolutely. But,
it's true.
But the exact design does not look like anything that's actually real.
No.
But it was fun. True. So, so then we get to the controversial part of the movie, which annoys me.
Yes.
So enter Dr. Yogami, who he's supposed to be Tibetan or Chinese, but the name Yogami is very similar to Japanese surnames. And he's played by Warner Olin, who is not Asian, he's Swedish. Which is just, it makes me cringe, and it's hard for me to watch, and we're still discussing this 80 years later in Hollywood about whitewashing and
I mean, I think the whole concept of having it be someone who is non-white who passes on the curse or whatever,
right?
I mean, is also hugely problematic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
otherism, stuff like that, but unfortunately this is common in films of that era. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's most notorious in Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Yeah, well, that's the one everyone references.
Yeah, just because that's one of the most popular.
And it's also the most. Movies. It is also most offensive. This movie isn't really offensive in portrayal as much as just the fact that he is not.
Right. And the fact
Asian.
that there is that whole, like it's a non-white person.
Yeah, sort of infecting the white person, which is, that is extremely problematic in its own right, which...
But they don't lean into any sort of cultural stereotypes like in Breakfast at Tiffany's quite as much.
Yeah, that's very true. So I'm not giving them a pass, but it's just as a degree of horribleness is not as high.
Right.
They should have cast a popular Japanese actor, and I'm not pronouncing his name correctly, but it's Sesui Hayakawa, I think. Anyway, Hayakawa is hugely important in Hollywood. He was a big star in the 30s, and unfortunately, due to kind of increasing racism within Hollywood and the audiences, a lot of his films were destroyed, which is very, very sad. He should have played the role of Dr. Yugami. That would have been amazing, and he was gorgeous. And Warner Oland is not the best looking man in the world, so yeah. So Hayakawa would have been amazing.
Can I ask a stupid question? Where's Tibet?
Tibet is like, I guess it's southwest of China. It's between India and China.
Oh, it says China.
Yeah, but it technically is China, but it's a small section of it.
Okay.
In the olden days, it used to be called Siam.
Oh, yes. So like The King and I.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's interesting. His relationship with Dr. London is interesting, and I'm feeling a little bit of, you could really read in some heavy homoerotic vibes here. I
mean, ultimately, you can queer most everything,
pretty much. But especially this, it's definitely, there's some very suggestive sort of dialogue, and that almost hints at, to me, I almost feel like Dr. Glendon has some sort of sexual crisis in a way. Either he's asexual or sort of maybe questioning or maybe bisexual. It's I mean, you could read it in a number of ways, but yet Dr. Yugami says that they met in Tibet, and he goes ... in the dark. And it's like, it's so funny that, Dr. Glendon doesn't really respond to that. He kind of is like, what are you talking about? But, the only encounter he had with anybody in the dark in Tibet is when he's attacked. So he's obviously in denial about that whole attack. But he's trying to piece it together. Anyway, so then Dr. Yugami says, talking about, lycanthrophobia, which is not a medical term. The technical term for things equivalent to being a werewolf is lycanthropy.
Yeah, so lycanthrophobia is fear of being a werewolf.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think is a pretty... I don't think anyone wants to be a werewolf. Not that I think there's anyone actively...
lycanthrophobic? Yeah, no, I know what you mean. So yeah, that's interesting that he kind of brings up this term. And I think they're trying to make it a scientific thing, and it doesn't really work.
I know it's the hardest scientific blunder for me to get past in the movie,
right?
Because they keep saying lycanthrophobia, and I'm like, it's not. Use the correct suffix.
One day there'll be a copy of this movie that resurfaces, and it'll be just Molly dubbing over every time they say lycanthrophobia.
Lycanthrophobia.
Lycanthropy.
Erotic hair sniffing.
Oh God, no. My kind of leap into this movie, in terms of like me making kind of assumptions about things. I definitely read maybe a bit too much into it, but when I'm looking at him as a character, Dr. Glendon, I would say he has depression. He doesn't really want to see. He doesn't want to socialize. He's very absorbed in his work. He's very, very moody. I mean, strained relationships. Yeah. I mean, there's so many symptoms and signs that you're like, I feel like he nowadays he would have been, technically clinically depressed.
Right. And when there's moments pre or during the transformation where it's very clear that he wants to be able to be with these people and he can't. And I think that is probably the clearest or maybe intentional read that you might get if having it to be some kind of mental illness. I mean, the thing with werewolves is just you can read so many different sorts of outside the binary qualities onto these characters.
Absolutely.
But I think in terms of the way the film is shot, and especially Henry Hall's portrayal of the character, that I really see the way you're reading it in terms of being it about mental illness, depression, asociality. I don't know if that's a word. Antisocial. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
You know, just
he clearly just doesn't really want to gel with, you know, he doesn't enjoy being social. It's not something he enjoys.
Or he can't. He feels some kind of, there's,
maybe he wants to deep down, but it just doesn't work for him.
And the werewolf is the manifestation of that.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
Wanting to connect and not being able to. And I think that is one of the most redeeming qualities about the film, and something that is still so important, you know, especially when there's still quite a stigma around mental illness and people throwing around that term to justify everything under the sun.
Absolutely.
But
right.
I think it's really especially pertinent right now, which is one of the reasons that I do really like this film for its flaws, which it clearly does have. It is beautiful in its portrayal of just the tragedy of Dr. Linden's character.
Yeah, absolutely. So then we get to, just like jump to the transformation scene.
Let's jump to it.
The cat kind of flips out and just starts hissing at him, and he's like, you know, why am I sort of, you know, I'm not feeling very well, you know. He just at that point he had an argument with his wife, who's going out with her friend, you know, Paul, and so he's being very jealous and he's very kind of wounded, but he definitely doesn't feel like himself, and he's very sensitive to light. And the cat starts hissing at him all of a sudden. So he goes outside, walking around in the moonlight, and he's starting to change. And this is where the brilliant cinematography comes in. To me, I think it's brilliant. It's very subtle. Nowadays, it wouldn't fly because it's very simple. But through every frame, he's walking behind these pillars, and every time he comes out from behind a pillar, he's changed just that little bit more because they've added more makeup, and so they've done this. They've cut the shots together, and it works brilliantly. There's a great flow. He keeps the same sort of steady pace, and it really does seem like he's physically changing. So it's exciting to watch. For sure.
It's really beautiful, and it just makes me really appreciate physical effects that much more because I feel. I haven't seen... there was like Benicio del Toro Wolfman that came out mid-2000s, late...
Okay.
I remember seeing trailers for it, and I love gothic monsters. So I haven't seen it, but I feel like you're just really missing something when it's a computer-generated sort of animal hybrid. Like, that was one of my big issues with the new Beauty and the Beast 2, is... just the practicality of the makeup and of the transformation just makes it seem that much more natural, and as a consequence, that much more terrifying. Yeah. I do have one note that I found on IMDb I want to insert here.
Yeah.
So, what IMDb kind of says about just the makeup in general is, while it has been well documented that Henry Hull objected to Jack Pierce's original makeup design for the werewolf, which Jack Pierce, in case you don't know, did the makeup for Frankenstein, The Mummy.
Yeah, The Mummy from 1931. I mean,
he did all of that classic stuff. And I think he maybe even did it for the Wolfman later on, like Lon Chaney's Wolfman.
Yes, he did. And his techniques were sort of falling out of fashion a little bit, unfortunately.
They were, but that was kind of his original vision.
Yeah. Oh, he was the classic. Yeah, absolutely.
So the producers of the film were worried that the makeup effects would push the boundary of censorship too much. And so they had to, like, tone down the makeup even more. Toned down the, quote, zoomorphic qualities of the werewolf transformation scenes, and asked him to make the werewolf appear more human in nature in order to gain approval of the censorship board. And this is the first design would be what was used in the Wolfman, which was 6 years later.
Right. Well, the original design looked very sort of, it had a sort of pig-like quality to it, and I know that Henry Hull was very against it, and not just because it was kind of ugly, but it hid his face, and his argument was, it wasn't an ego trip about, they need to see my face. It was more of, there's a later scene where characters have to identify him and sort of guess who he is while he is still transformed. And they said, he said, well, how are they going to know that it's me if I'm completely covered? He said there still has to be a little bit of me that comes through. And I think the balance was absolutely spot on. And
no, I agree.
So I know that Henry Hull and Jack Pierce argued about this
Mm-hmm.
and did not get along after that. And, you know, Jack Pierce apparently was very sort of stubborn and closed-minded about it, which is a shame. But Henry Hull, who had been doing his own makeup on stage for many years, kind of had an instinct for what was going to work for him.
Right. And I think it works really well. And this was at such an early stage still with makeup that it's not like the makeup artists we have today where you still get such emotion like through the amphibian man in Shape of Water.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I think having it be more minimalistic works in his favor too, especially because then it's not a man, it's not a beast, it's some awful hybrid that's terrorizing these people that's come out. And when you have it being, you know, like if it was like again, I'm going to go back to Beauty and the Beast, like the computer generated, and you miss that sort of
visceral quality.
Exactly. The visceral quality that makes it a threat or that makes it sort of terrifying.
Right, because it feels physically real. And that's my argument for the last movie that really did the physical effects was American Werewolf in London.
I mean, of a werewolf, because, Doug Jones has done incredible work with his
absolutely,
makeup stuff.
But werewolves specifically, and that transformation scene was, the physical effects in that were so mind-blowing, and because they're physically there, you know they're not actually real. But because they're physically there, it does something to your brain, I swear. And you just, like, you absorb this, and it does feel very real. Yeah.
No, and I think that's an interesting thing to think about in terms of modern horror films and things of that nature. Because the films that I can't watch, or that are going to be hard for me to watch if I do watch them, would be films like The Fly or The Thing or maybe even American Werewolf in London, because it is all that visceral practical effects.
Absolutely.
Whereas the modern day remakes, it's all CGI, and so you're like, the horror isn't there.
Right.
Which, even though it's practical and you know it's not real and you know it's just ketchup or whatever it is, that's, you know, some kind of goo that's coming out of Jeff Goldblum's face.
I can't watch that movie.
I know.
I love Jeff, but I got to draw the line at that movie.
I love Jeff too. I want to get to it eventually.
Yeah.
And I like Kurt Russell a lot, so I also want to watch The Thing, just because that seems really interesting, and a really interesting thing to kind of talk about.
Yeah.
It's just harder to watch.
Right.
Which lends, I should say, credence to just how great the practical effects are.
Absolutely. Yeah, so the practical effects in this are amazing. Where am I here?
The transformation, and that's when he goes out.
Yes, and so he's transformed. He realizes, oh dear, this is a thing now. And
does he kill someone the first night?
I think he might, or he definitely attacks someone the first night. But it's always women.
It's always women.
Yeah, you have to have that scream in there. But I know he's going. So the flower, of course, is the cure.
Yes,
which Dr. Yagami has already told him.
But you can only use it it's only good for one night, right?
Yeah, so the bloom, after it's bloomed, you can only use it, if you pluck it, you can only, so he stabs it into his vein or artery or something, but when you look at the movie, it looks like he's stabbing into his, like, dorsal metacarpal vein, and not, like, on the inside of his palm, which would it would go into your bloodstream better. I don't know any of that stuff. This is
the film with lycanthrophobia, okay?
Yes, we're gonna just ignore that.
Throw it out the window.
It's like the sort of juice of this flower, whatever properties this flower has. You put it directly into your hand, and there's even there was blood effects on his hand, and which looks great in black and white because you can't tell what the red color or consistency is, so they don't have to worry about the effects as much. But it did look very real. So Dr. Yagami steals the other flowers. So it's like a cure for that particular night. And like you said, it's a one-time dosage kind of thing. But Dr. Yagami takes the remaining flowers, and that's when kind of all hell breaks loose, because Dr. London does go out and actually attack people.
And he starts to go after his wife.
Yes.
Or the people near her.
Yeah.
And I know
he follows them to a party.
Right. And I know I feel like the movie gave a reasoning for why he was obsessed, or why the werewolf would be obsessed with the wife. Mm-hmm. But I don't remember what it is off the top of my head.
I think it was motivated by kind of the love or the sexual passion or whatever he can't express when he's human.
The person that could hurt you the most.
I think, and Dr. Yagami said something about, you always hurt the the one you love most or the thing you love most or whatever. And so so he really does love his wife more than his work, but when he's a human or not a hybrid and not in his kind of werewolf state, he
can't express it.
Yeah, he can't express it at all, and he seems to put his work first, and that's the problem with their marriage that they can't solve.
Paul during this time. I mean, so there's also then this kind of the little break from the werewolf and Dr. Glennon's drama is the Scotland Yard or a newspaper or somewhere. Paul has family somewhere.
Paul's uncle, yeah.
Yeah. And people are saying it's some kind of monster. And they're like, it's not a monster. It's not a... And Paul's like, I'm going to find this monster. And I'm going to... You know, that's
the hero, yes.
That
the great
1930s
hero.
sort of, I'm strong, I'm going to get the monster. And it's a man. Kind of voice.
On the radio.
Yeah.
Over the radio, the ham radio or something. I have 3,000 words on this thing. I know.
She did a walkthrough on Tumblr that's honestly a work of art, and she just took screenshots of a bunch of different parts of the film and then talked about them relating to this thesis. It's basically you wrote a thesis about this movie.
I kind of did. I mean, it's a little bit more of a casual thesis of, you know, it's bullet pointed in some spots, but it's basically a thesis. Oh, so then what happens is he goes and thinks, I got to lock myself up.
Yes.
So he goes to, you know, a tacky little sort of inn over a bar in London somewhere, and he then, you know, cue the kind of drunk old lady trope, which is tedious.
This part of the movie, and they're stealing beer from each other and coins from each other, but they're pretending to be friends.
They smack each other in the face a couple times, and you're like, what?
I
mean, she lays out her friend totally, just bam, fist to the side. I don't understand. So it's very Punch and Judy-ish.
Very.
It's very kind of stereotypical, you know, washerwomen type, you know, argument between two British ladies in there. So then the party happens, and they can hear Dr. Glendon going, woo, in the darkness, and that sounded like a party rant rather than woo, outside the window going, I'm having such a great time, woo, 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 woo. Kind of like drunk college kids, no. Yeah, but yeah, so they hear that. Oh my God. Yes, so they hear Dr. Glendon say, Spring Break 09, and... No, they hear
like it's going down. It's going
Someone's had too much yeg. So there's a howl. And, yeah, and Dr. Yogami is like quaking in his spats, which is very cute. But they're like, "Whoa, you're nervous," and he's like literally like almost shaking and like, "Oh God,"
because he's at this party.
And then he suddenly feels guilty because he's taken the medicine away from Dr. Glendon, and none of this would have happened if he just like left a single bloom for this guy. But because Dr. Glendon is so, you know, stubborn about it, they could have shared the flower, but then Dr. Yogami's like, okay, fine, I'll just steal them then when you're not looking. But then, you know, one of their friends, the host of the party, gets drunk. She's upstairs. She's in bed. The windows are open, and then Dr. Glendon, as the werewolf, comes in and like scares the crap out of her. And she's screaming, so they race up to go and see what's going on. And she's like, "Oh, werewolf attack!" Not a werewolf, but like, I've been attacked, and oh, horrible monster and everything. And they're like, "Oh yeah, you just had a bad dream. Go back to sleep, you drunk old lady."
Well, no, yeah, because she was drunk. They're like, "You had some weird yeg."
Yeah.
Lay off the yeg, Auntie Sally.
Yes. So they kind of just discounted her fears, and they you know, she was crying, and they put her to bed, and then they go home.
This is also in Death Takes a Holiday too.
It is.
Also, there's a woman who's like, I see death in his eyes, and the men are like, basically, listen to your women.
Listen to your women, whether they're drunk or not.
Exactly.
Cue next morning, Dr. London opens the paper, and he's like, oh, crap, I accidentally killed somebody last night. Shoot. And it's, you know from that point on that this is not going to end well for him.
No. That's
the point. There's always that point in the horror movie where you know there's no turning back for the main character. So he reads about this, and then, you know, he has a fight with his wife, and they argue, and he's like, you know, basically doesn't want her to hang out with this ex-beau of hers, and so it's kind of sad, but you can see that he really does care for her, and that they could have worked it out had he not become a werewolf, because that's the thing that really destroys marriages, when somebody becomes a werewolf.
You know, it's just a bummer, man.
Yeah. So his wife...
Affairs, alcoholism, lycanthropy.
Of course, it's like the trifecta.
The number 3.
It's the trifecta.
The top 3 just reasons marriages fall apart.
Lycanthropy, number 1 cause of divorce in the tri-state area. So his wife Lisa is very hurt
by this argument that they have, and the details of the argument it's just about Paul, right?
It's basically about Paul, and she's like, I want you to come out and hang out with us, and he's like, no, I'm not into it. And then, of course, he's jealous as well. He doesn't want to sit through all those cute little school stories they have about each other and how they used to hang out and stuff.
And I don't blame him.
Yeah.
I'd be pissy, too.
I agree. That would be the point in their marriage where they could have worked it out, and she would have been like, no, it's okay. I only have eyes for you, and we'll move on, even though she still is totally into Paul.
And as are you, so
yeah.
She's not alone. What I think this movie does well, though, is that as much as I sympathize with Henry Hull's character, I also sympathize with the wife and with Paul. Whereas in other movies of this era, like when we talk about cat people, I absolutely hated the quote-unquote hero and like the girl that he ends up with. They were just terrible people, terrible characters. You don't have any sympathy for them. It just doesn't work the way that the film wants it to work for you.
But this is a realistic portrayal of a marriage in many ways, because it's like both sides are kind of wrong, and it's like something they could have worked through, but of course they can't. So Dr. Glendon is kind of a jerk in a lot of ways, but you do feel sympathy for him, and
he's a jerk in some ways, but it's also very clear, and Henry Hull does a great job of just facially expressing too just how much he does love and care about his wife, which is, it's a gorgeous part of the movie.
It is great.
But then it's the final night, right?
The final night, yes. So then they Dr. Yagami says to the police, I think they kind of gives them the heads up. And so then they were like, oh, this is ridiculous. Lycanthropy's not a thing. And
lycanthrophobia.
Lycanthrophobia. Yeah, I got to get the correct term. But, goes to Scotland Yard or whatever and says, you got to be on top of this. And so they kind of discount it. But then, so they go in search of Dr. Yagami at one point, and they say his room, and this is so gross, they say his room smells like a kennel. And I don't know, is that because he's marked his scent, like peed all over the room?
Is he dead by this point?
No, he's not, because but soon after that. But they find a dead maid or something, and then they realize that he's run out of juice from the flowers.
I think it's just because he's a wolf.
Yeah, I think, that too, but like my immediate thought was, oh dear, he's marking his territory. I don't know. But anyway, so they find the dead maid, and then...
I'm not making any pee-pee tape comments. I'm not making any pee-pee tape comments.
So anyway, Paul digs around in the trash and finds these flowers. And he's like, putting two and together. Like, oh man, you should be a detective. Big stretch.
We're so proud of you, Paul. You're doing so good, sweetie.
Yeah.
You're doing great.
Yes. So, they put two and two together and they kind of figure this out. And eventually... So Dr. Glendon at this point, this is his second or third night having this. He's already killed multiple women. They go to their old homestead, where he used to kind of court his wife Lisa when they were going out. And so he goes back there and sort of has himself locked up. But he's in a room that's it's not part of a chapel, but it's a place where it's kind of like a hideout. And there's there are bars in the window, and those bars are toast because once he transforms, he's going to break free. So he breaks free
because he sees Lisa walking around with Paul.
Lisa and Paul have decided, let's go for a little moonlight stroll around my old haunt, because it's like Lisa's family home or whatever.
Right.
And so of course then he attacks her, and then Paul's like, oh wait, I recognize this monster. And then they've kind of figured out it. So Paul basically figures out that it is actually Dr. Glendon.
How does Glendon die?
Dr. Glendon, he's just about to take the flower again, put some in his vein or whatever, but Dr. Yagami steals them again, and somehow he sneaks into his lab. How poor is your security camera?
Right, yeah.
Ridiculous. So anyway, Dr. Yagami comes into the lab and steals the last of the flowers, and so Dr. Glendon is transforming as this is happening, and he kills him. which is a very dramatic scene and quite violent. So it's not technically pre-code, but you're like it's on the edge. Anyway, so then Dr. Glendon, as transformed, goes to the old stomping grounds and attacks Lisa, and that's kind of like the final sort of scene where they finally go after him. And sadly,
they're in the house.
They're in the house now, and so they go after Dr. Glendon when he's transformed, and the police shoot him as he's going up the steps to kind of go attack Lisa, but he's doing it very slowly because I think there's still a part of Henry
that recognizes.
Yeah, there's still a part of the actual doctor character who recognizes her, and then she goes, "It's Lisa," and then he finally he looks like he's sort of getting it, and then they shoot him, and then of course as he's dying, then
he transforms back.
You
have to read his final words.
Yeah,
too.
but it's so sad. He goes, "Goodbye, Lisa. Lisa, goodbye. I'm sorry. I couldn't have made you happier." And it's like, that really hurts. It's very, very, but the way he delivers the lines, it's a very realistic sort of last words, because he doesn't get, it's how some people, they're having a big death scene and they give like paragraphs worth of when you're bleeding out, who has the energy for that? Mm-hmm. But he gives like just those few lines is very, very sweet and moving, and kind of hints the fact that it could be kind of a depression thing. Like he really wanted to try at the marriage, and just like he's just incapable of putting enough into it, or what he knows he can put into it, but he just for some reason can't. And so yeah, it's very sad.
Yeah. Well, and then the police have arrived and they see him lying there. Some more people come in. They're like, "What happened?"
Yeah.
And then Paul's character says, I think the thing that sticks out to me the most from the movie is he says he died protecting his wife.
Yeah, that's what they say. They're going to say in the police report, instead of going into the whole detailed thing in Scotland Yard of saying, yeah, he's a werewolf and he was going to attack his wife and then we had to shoot him. It's like, no, he died protecting his wife. So that's a very sweet way of, like, they knew that it was the him being a werewolf that was the problem and not the actual person. So it's like they're just gonna
Well, and he you can see in those final moments he's fighting the werewolf to not go after her. Like he recognizes it's her. He pauses multiple times. It's it's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking, but beautiful in a way. Side note too about the whole silver bullet thing. In the movie, there's no reference to silver bullet at all.
Where did that come from?
Well, I kind of did a little bit of research on this. So in the movie, just a regular bullet, takes care of him. And so the myth that the werewolf can only be killed by a silver bullet dates back to the legend of the beast of, and I cannot pronounce this correctly, but Gévaudan?
Yeah, it's a French thing.
Yeah, I'm bad at pronouncing French if I don't hear it first. So it's basically about just a ginormous wolf who's killed by a hunter named Argent, and Argent is like Latin for silver. And so he loads this gun with silver bullets, and so I guess the filmmakers of this movie didn't think it was relevant to add the thing about the silver bullet and add to that kind of mythology. They wanted to be more, I guess, realistic. Either that or they just didn't care about it enough to add it. But it's interesting, side note, to have that whole mythology angle. Because nowadays we think, werewolf, silver bullet. And I think it was probably in the Lon Chaney Jr. version, The Wolfman. I'm pretty sure silver was involved in that movie in some way, shape, or form. But not in this one. So this is the earliest movie of this.
Yeah, well, and I know, so, complete and total sidebar, I listened to an episode of My Favorite Murder, I think at one point, that talked about a werewolf killer from France at that time, who people thought was a werewolf, or he thought he was a werewolf, or they thought wolves were killing girls. And so that's kind of where the silver bullet thing also emerged.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know what episode it was, but I'm sure you can find more information on it.
Yes. So, heartbreaking ending to a brilliant film.
Yeah. I mean, with its flaws.
With its flaws.
But yeah, I mean, again, this is just another film that should be, it's like I said earlier, it should be just another sort of dumb horror movie, but there's so much quality to it and so much that can be read onto it.
Absolutely.
That you have to feel that these weren't just consequences of making the movie. You have to feel that some of these things were intentional, perhaps, not necessarily all the theories we might apply to it nowadays.
That's very true. But there's a lot of substance to dig into, for sure.
A lot of substance, which I feel, again, I feel some directors are really passionate about their movies and are able to do that more nowadays. But at the same time, I also feel like a lot of film is just losing nuance that's here in these movies.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah. No, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous movie. And I really ascribe to that idea of it being an issue of depression. And I think it's a good analogy case study, I guess, for what it's like for someone. Not that, obviously you're not a werewolf.
Yes.
But the isolation you experience because of it, the conflicting desires, wanting something but not physically being capable of doing it. Right. I mean, it's just... Yeah. It's a really great portrayal of someone who's lived with... I mean, I've had depression. Yeah. So that just really resonated with me in a way, watching the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same. And I think having a movie with consequences, having a horror movie with consequences is obviously the kind of the point, especially in those older films. I feel like it's definitely kind of a moral tale in a way.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they all are. Yeah, the monsters are never... They ascribe more to that idea of monere, which I think is the Latin word for monster, to act as a portent or a warning. Yeah. Instead of just the modern idea of monsters, where it's like,
shock value. Yeah. Jump scare.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah. This film just does it really well. I haven't seen the 1941 Wolfman.
No, I haven't.
So I'm curious what that does with the werewolf mythology.
Yeah. I seem to remember that it seems a bit more campy to me. I know it's the classic, especially with the kind of like shirt tearing and kind of running through the woods and there's mist and everything. So this is a more, I would say, almost Victorian approach, which I prefer personally. That's just more closely, it resonates with me a lot more. But yeah, two very different films. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's incredible acting in this film. I'm very impressed by all of it.
I agree. Henry Hall especially, I mean, just gives an incredible
he said so before the film came out. I mean, he had so much stage work. He's clearly a consummate actor, and so his sort of death scene, very subtle but extremely moving.
And that's how death scenes should.
It should be, and sort of fast, because it's like, he's been shot in the back. Of course, he's going to die fairly quickly.
Yeah, and the person can die quickly, but still have just a breathing moment. Whereas, which is kind of a problem, I think, with some modern blockbusters, which we don't have to talk about because have you seen The Force Awakens?
No, okay. I need to see it.
We're not going to talk about that. And I mean, your incredible literary analysis aside, I would recommend this movie for that reason, because it's such a good portrayal. But also, I mean, technically, what it accomplishes, the performances by the actors, the way it's shot is gorgeous, especially the transformation scenes are beautiful. Right. And they're doing some cool stuff, too, with mirror work and with the video cameras and inserting that. Like, to have that be in a film in 1935 seems mind-blowing.
Quite seamlessly, too, I might add.
Only 10 years earlier was, like, The Vampire and Nosferatu, and they still couldn't figure out how to shoot dark.
Yes, so they had to...
And make it visible. I mean, it's literally only 10 years later, and they've accomplished that much.
Yeah. So, fictitious flowers out of 10.
Fictitious flowers out of 10. I'm going to say, I want to say 9 out of 10 because of Henry Hall's performance and the technical stuff. The problems kind of make me want to drop it more to a 7 or 8 out of 10. Oh,
absolutely.
Just because of the whitewashing.
Yeah, ditto. So, I would kind of do a split rating for this, too. I think general quality, style, all its properties it has, definitely give it maybe a 9.5 out of 10. But lose several flowers.
Lose a lot of petals.
Lose a lot of darn petals for the whitewashing. So I don't really have any tolerance for that. But in the context of the time period and our knowledge of what's appropriate and what's not, I would definitely give this film a 9 out of 10. But subtracting points for that, I would probably give it a 5 out of 10 for the problematic stuff. But with the death scene, he's free of his lycanthropy, and that's, there's a piece there. So that's kind of nice. And then the plane goes up in the air, implying that Paul and Lisa have gone off to California because he has an airplane business or a flying school. And then they do a really nice shot where they go back to the Universal Studios airplane around the globe, which is very cool.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, do you have any other final thoughts on the film? This is one I would definitely recommend that anyone could watch. I feel like this is, out of the 3 that we've discussed so far, is maybe the most accessible.
Yeah, I would say so. Especially for a film buff. If I knew that someone was a film buff, I would say you have to watch this.
Yes. Followed by Black Cat.
Mm-hmm.
And then putting House of Usher last, as much as I love Vincent Price.
Yeah, that's true.
Even with blonde hair. I mean, it's definitely the least interesting.
Yes.
Which is weird to say that a movie that is incest is the least interesting out of the 3 movies we've talked about so far.
Yeah.
But that's just the way it is.
So, we're not 100% sure what film we're doing next because we have a big spreadsheet. And
we have such a big spreadsheet.
We're trying to figure it out. So,
and we're going to have to shuffle it around a bit.
Right.
We had a different film planned.
Yeah, we did.
But I haven't watched it yet. So that's going to happen before the next time
That's
we
fine.
record.
But we're going to decide, and then we're going to put updates onto
our Instagram
post. Yeah, we're going to Instagram post that. And so keep an eye on those. And again, that's Shadow and Light Podcast on Instagram. So same handles we have on SoundCloud.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, until next time, be safe and stay hungry like the wolf.
And don't get bitten.
Yeah.